Is the worst yet to come, Dr. Fauci?
Yes, it is. I can say we will see more cases and things will get worse than they are right now. How much worse we'll get will depend on our ability to do two things: to contain the influx in people who are infected coming from the outside, and the ability to contain and mitigate within our own country. Bottom line, it's going to get worse.
With coronavirus spreading to more than 100 countries, world markets are going nuts this morning. European stocks are down 6%. Dow futures dropped over 1,000 points. Investors had hoped a speech from President Trump would calm the markets. It seems to have done the exact opposite, with the drop-off starting as his speech ended.
So joining us now to explain about the impact of coronavirus on the global economy is Kev Cirilli. He's the chief Washington correspondent for Bloomberg TV and Radio. Great to see you, Kevin.
Here we go.
Yeah, it's tough times here. All right, so let's start off with the markets. I mean, the Dow futures, I think, down by over 1,000 points, marked 6%, as well after sustained losses over the last couple of weeks. Why did Wall Street react the way it did to the president's remarks?
I think you have to divorce the rhetorical, political chatter from the actual economic reality, which is that when the president's policy decisions as it relates to travel restrictions in particular are going to be more crushing to the airline industry than post 9/11, as some analysts are talking about this morning. But beyond that, I think it's also Wall Street waking up, and this is where I would say divorce it from the politics just for a second, is waking up to the new reality of the economic uncertainty that has spread very quickly throughout the world. And so, look, I think that there's chatter, as we talked about earlier this week, about there potentially being some type of bipartisan economic congressional vehicle to inject liquidity into the markets to free up spending. I think, for the president to call on $50 billion for SBA lending in particular, it shows very nuanced, laser-like focus for trying to spur economic growth in hardest hit impacts. But this is really a two-pronged effort on Republicans and Democrats alike between the health concern and the economic concern.
Right.
I mean, honestly, at this point, and we don't even really know what the economic fallout is yet because we haven't seen earnings. I mean, we have very little insight other than what we can see walking around, that stores are empty, restaurants are empty, streets are empty, airports are empty. All of that you can see with your own eyes. But we really have no idea how deeply the economy has been impacted at this point.
I was at the Labor Department just 2 weeks ago when they released their, when I reported on the jobs day numbers. I mean, this month's job report is going to be crippling.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be disastrous.
And I think you're going to start to hear about
what do you think? What should expectations be for
Well, I think you have to look at a massive, if you look at the retail industry in particular, if you look at tourism, if you look at hospitality, that's going to be significantly hardest hit. If you look at temporary hires and workers in terms, so I think you're going to hear from the administration that this is a one-off or this is a 2-month off, but it's not really. I think expectations now are that it's not going to be until midsummer, potentially until you're out of the economic
And even
fallout.
then, I want to set everybody's expectations, which is that even when people start to go back to work, often with these pandemics and flus, that there is a second wave. And so we have to understand that this is something that could be with us for quite some time. I want to bring up something that Annie Linsky over from The Atlantic tweeted yesterday. It was very insightful, which is basically about 70% of the U.S. economy is consumer spending. If we have a sustained drop of just 3.6% for a sustained period, that's undefined, the economy is in recession.
Wow.
That's not good, is it, Kevin?
No.
When we have that amount of reliance on consumer spending, and I think it's fair to say that if things get worse, 3.6 is the least of our worries.
I think that there's a reality on Wall Street amongst analysts and around the world, quite frankly, that there likely will be a technical recession. That's what many folks are saying. Now, they're also saying, as we talked about earlier this week, that the immediate comparison is 2008. That's what we all experienced.
Yes.
However, no recession is alike. And so I think we don't know whether or not the banks and the financial institutions, which have had to draw on full credit. I mean, if you look at Boeing, for example, they've had to call on all of their money
loans,
and all of their loans. I mean, we don't know the impacts that's going to have. We just don't know.
Yeah.
And so until we know that, which likely will be around midsummer, when people can finally catch their breath from this, we just don't know. I will say that I heard in your intro that you were talking about the pharmaceuticals in China and how I think it's like 90%.
Yeah, 90%.
I interviewed Senator Marsha Blackburn yesterday, who has a bill with Senator Menendez, a Democrat from New Jersey, about this essentially economic patriotism. And I think you're going to start to hear much more of that. And Senator Elizabeth Warren, you and I have talked offline about this, Crystal, where she had a sense of economic patriotism message. I think that will come back forcefully.
It's coming back.
Right.
Ted Cruz tweeted about it yesterday. Senator Hawley was on Tucker Carlson. But the thing is, at this point, it's too late. I mean, honestly, we don't have the productive capacity to build anything in this country anymore, and especially critical pharmaceuticals.
I'm an optimist. Because it's so much doom and gloom. Look, let's be optimistic for just a second. Because look, sports are shut down. You know, churches are closed. Hollywood impacted by this. You know,
schools are starting to shut down.
Yeah, Coachella's over.
Schools in Pennsylvania. I mean, it's you know, in the DMV region as well.
Yeah.
But look, there's always a comeback. They're not going to be shut down forever. I remember post 9/11. Remember when sports came back and it was a moment of national pride, national unity.
Absolutely.
And maybe we need some social distancing to figure out how much we all really need each other.
True.
I like that.
I'm an optimist.
See, that is a good point.
It's a little.
On the other hand, we have to be honest that the American workforce is in no position to sustain any kind of blow. And I mean, frankly, the relief that's been floated at this point is pathetic. Payroll tax cut does nothing for workers who don't have a job. Well, you know, it disproportionately helps the affluent. Okay, well, they're probably going to be fine anyway. You know, most people can't afford a $400 emergency. What is this going to amount to? Many people don't have health insurance. Many people don't have paid sick leave. Now, maybe we're going to get that as well. But it seems like the administration and Congress, to be fair, is way behind where they should be in terms of getting ahead of both the health crisis and the economic crisis.
And that's just the everyday people who are experiencing this. And I think you're going to hear a lot about liquidity.
Right.
The president met with the top bank CEOs yesterday, a day earlier, the insurance, a day prior to that, the airline CEOs, today in Silicon Valley, tech executives. You're going to hear this notion of liquidity.
So explain what liquidity is to the audience.
Money to inject from massive corporations to inject confidence into the economy to free up money. Because look, if everyone's going like this and everyone's consumer anxiety and tense and not lending to businesses and not lending to airline companies, not lending to Boeing, not lending to all of these massive companies. Yes, I mean, it's different than trickle-down economics, but if the top is doing that and not spending money, we're all going to feel that as well. So greasing the wheels and providing liquidity to small businesses just as much as big businesses is something that we're already starting to hear a lot about.
And one thing is, Kevin, I am more heartened because this time around, I get the case, 2008, no bailouts, right? Like, you're like, look, you guys screwed up this thing. Why should we bail you out? This time around, it's nobody's fault. Like, in terms of political capital, this is a black swan event, totally. So from a political conditions perspective, we're not at the place where we're going to have a bunch of people saying no bailouts whatsoever.
And bailouts are different than so
well,
there are
some,
things,
but not
there
all.
are things that regulators can do that are not bailouts that make that allow for there to be more access to capital in businesses. But I think Crystal touched, and both of you are touching on. I mean, I always say you guys have your finger on the pulse of populism. It's
Thank you.
But it's okay if you're going to free up liquidity for the top, make sure you're doing it for the bottom.
Yeah.
And
that's it.
And that I think is what is going to, I think, where there's an opportunity for certain lawmakers to come together to move some type of bipartisan economic vehicle that would inject confidence into the economy.
Because in the financial collapse, I mean, on the one hand, they bailed out Wall Street, which of course was the cause of the problems, and on the other hand, they left homeowners to be screwed, many of whom still have never recovered from that financial loss. So that, I think, is where the anger would come from, is if you see, oh, we're going to prop up the airline industry, oh, we're going to prop up the oil industry, but, you know, good luck with your piddling payroll tax cut, American worker who's now laid off, who benefits zero from that, or you can defer your tax payments a little bit. I mean, that's at this point, that response, I think, is pathetic.
And I think, you know, when I talked to PIMCO's Mohamed El-Arian, who's a top economist, a global economist, you know, he often talks about this. I mean, you don't have to have an MBA or an economics degree from Harvard to know about the impacts of psychological effects on a recession. And so we can't talk ourselves, and we don't want to talk ourselves into a disaster. We want to be realists about this. But, you know, I think it's important that when as we're navigating through this, that yes, there will be a comeback. I mean, and there will. I mean, and the difference between 2008 and now, and we don't know how long the coronavirus will last, but if this is the sort, there's never been a recession in modern history that was caused by a health scare.
So last question for you, Kevin, very much on today. I mean, what's your expectation for the markets today? And we're going to be posting this before the markets open.
Yeah.
Volatility. And so I think we're in a volatile time, and that volatility and the up and down roller coaster will continue. I think what Washington is looking for from Wall Street is time. I think what Wall Street is looking for Washington is a cure-all.
Yeah.
And that right now, there is no panacea.
That's a good point. All right, Kevin, thank you.
Great to have you, Kevin. Thank you. Next up on Rising, Congressman Chuck Fleischmann is going to give us the House's response to coronavirus as the infection continues to spread. That's next.